us for the top 8. Looking over, we can see that Philip Schulz is going to be playing against Frank Percic. In that first match for us, I believe that will be our feature match for the top 8. And we can also see Azul playing against Joe. Jimmy and William are going to be playing one of those Buzzwole Lycanroc mirror matches. And Corey has his work cut out for him as his Volcanion Ho-Oh deck is going to have to take out Tord Reklev, who is on a tear looking to take his 3rd international championship.
So looking at these names, obviously you have that Tord Reklev that we spoke about and Philip Schulz, but which other players jump out at you as being big names in the Pokemon community?
Definitely Azul. We haven't had him on stream just yet. He had a pretty quiet day 1, but he was on a tear day 2. I believe he earned a pretty big amount of points, especially to get himself into that 5th seed. And he's done it pretty quietly. He's a fantastic player. I haven't actually seen him pilot this deck before, so I'm also interested to see what kind of twist he brings to this deck, if he decided to go with those energy switches and if he can find the perfect plays, because he's known for finding those 0.1 percenters and getting himself in the perfect position.
Yeah, and what about players like Jimmy Pendarvis or Frank Percic? I believe Frank actually played this deck, this Buzzwole Garbodor, at a regionals quite recently and made top 16 or narrowly missed top 16. So he has a lot of experience with this deck and probably knows how to pilot it. And Jimmy, we just saw in the last couple of games with the Buzzwole and the Lycanroc, pretty fast plays as well. A lot of his games went down to, game 3, 5 to 7 minutes, and he had to really quickly get a win. So, he's able to play under pressure. And I suppose, how do you think these players will go under the pressure of being in top 8?
Well, if I had to start to predict how this top 8 was going to fall out, I believe that Frank is going to take out Philip. That matchup just seems pretty difficult for Philip, but and Frank just really knows what he's doing. If we go down to the bottom portion of that side of the bracket, Azul against Joe. If Azul's list is similar to Jimmy's, I'm going to give him the position there to take out Joe. Jimmy Pendarvis playing against William. I'm going to give the advantage to Jimmy Pendarvis there. Just watching him on stream, how many max elixirs this guy gets, it's unfair. If he's going to continue this tear, then I think he's going to find success. And then I'm going to say that Tord Reklev's able to take out Corey and ending that Volcanion run that you've been prompting us for so often.
Hey, I think top 8 is good enough. I'll accept that. With these Buzzrock mirrors, these Buzzwole-GX Lycanroc mirrors that we're seeing with Jimmy against William and then also Azul against Joe, would you say a lot of it comes down to maybe with these similar lists, who can actually go first? I mean, is the game decided before it even begins?
Yeah, the coin flip is pretty important, but honestly, I think it comes down to the timing of your max elixirs and if you have the Floatstone / Guzma, do you have the way to save your energies on board while also getting those big swing turns? That's something that comes up so often. Are you wasting energies retreating? Do you have the energies in the perfect spot? Can you energy switch to your Lycanroc and get a big dangerous rogue attack off? There's so many different things that can happen in that matchup, and it's going to be pretty exciting to see how these players end up.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we're going to see Philip against Frank. Philip Schulz with that Gardevoir Zoroark deck, and Frank, as we were talking, that Buzzwole-GX Garbodor deck. Do you think Philip's going to have to change his play style a little bit, just because he has to worry about things like discarding items with that trade, or he's going to have to use rare candies to be able to get Gardevoir out. He can't use the slow route of routes, Curlier, Gardevoir-GX. Do you think he's going to have to... Trash Launch will be an impactful card in this matchup?
I think the one thing that I may have underestimated when we're looking at this matchup is if Philip does get an early Gardevoir, he can just use his Twilight GX and just take all those items and shuffle them back into his deck. Doesn't have to worry about Trash Launch, and maybe that gives him enough tools to come out on top, enough field blowers to make sure that he has his abilities. It really just depends on how the draw works. The only player that I've seen with this deck getting the early Gardevoirs has been Tord, but maybe it's time for Philip to get that luck.
He is, what did he say? He was the pioneer of the list that everyone is running. I believe they're all playing pretty similar lists, 60-card mirrors maybe of each other. Yeah, they're all running the same list, and so hopefully he can have the same success that Tord's been having. How big do you think Gardevoir-GX is against a Buzzwole-GX? Because we haven't really seen, other than the Gardevoir-GX Zoroark-GX deck, Gardevoir hasn't really shown up, in its traditional form.
Yeah.
So how do you think Gardevoir actually goes against Buzzwole?
Well, I think the important piece is if you're going to attack with your Gardevoir into the Buzzwole, did the Buzzwole player get that rainbow energy down onto the Buzzwole, making it an increment of 30 damage? Because that can save you from attaching way too many energies to a Pokemon that may just get de-evolved for a knockout. Also, do you have your Mew so that you can just save yourself from using your Gardevoir and try to sneak knockouts on the Buzzwole, but you also have to do that while a field blower is out, because while you use a field blower, because you don't want to play into Garbotoxin.
Yeah, definitely. We're also talking about that Espeon-EX being such a big card when this list isn't running rare candies. I suppose that's not something we've seen for a while. A lot of people in the traditional Gardevoir deck were running things like, Vulpix to search out evolutions for Ralts, or they're just kind of foregoing having too many rare candies. But now that Espeon-EX is back, I'm sure Philip is thinking maybe that one Curlier might have been a good idea, just to make sure my Gardevoir can stay, alive.
Yeah, this list is playing rare candies, and a lot of them. They don't play any Curlia. It's very interesting to see how players have taken their Gardevoir builds since the European Internationals. We've even seen the Sao Paulo regional, where it was a 4-4 Curlia, and using Diancie to evolve all of their Pokemon. So very strange to see that the best build potentially now is going to be one that just doesn't even have Curlia, but it plays very strongly into Espeon, and I'm sure Frank's very excited for that.
Yeah, definitely. So interesting to see how Gardevoir has changed over the same sort of set of cards as well.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the exact same format as the European International Championships, and yet there where we had a Gardevoir with a Sylveon, and everyone thought, this is the best build of Gardevoir, and then we saw that Gardevoir with the Miltank, and now Gardevoir with Zoroark. So it'd be interesting to see if it continues to evolve, or if Gardevoir's just going to drop off after this tournament again.
Yeah, it just really depends how the meta lines up, and right now I think Philip and Tord found a fantastic spot for it, and they're in a great spot to find success. Just really depends on how this game pans out for them. I believe the players are getting underway for us right now. Don't know if we can head over to the match and see how these players are doing. Looks like they're just getting their hands ready for us, so maybe another minute or so. I'm just so excited to get into this game, honestly.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be at the top 8. I mean, we had so many players at the beginning of the day, and these guys have just emerged with the most match points, the most victories, you'd have to say. And now, they're the best 8 that have rocked up to Oceania, and they've come from all over the world as well. Don't know what happened to the Australian players. I mean, we had 10 in the top 32, so maybe just some unlucky draws, or just weren't able to pull out the wind at the end there. I do know that the 9th place deck, so what we would typically call the bubble, was that Hoover deck that we were so desperate to see, and we just never saw it on stream, which is a little bit disappointing, but I'm sure people will know the list eventually and, be able to give credit to this player who came 9th.
Yeah, Hoopa attack, it didn't make it in, but still a very impressive run to get 9th at such an event with all these amazing players.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll have to see for the future internationals if these guys can pull it out again and really make a name for themselves as being consecutively at the top 8s at the internationals.
Well, you asked where all the Australian players are. I'm hoping that they're in the crowd with us, watching this game and getting excited to see some amazing Pokemon coverage that we have. If you're watching at home, be sure to get it on your Twitter and follow with that hashtag #PlayPokemon. Every social media aspect, just use that hashtag Pokemon, and you can follow along. And let us know who you think is going to come out on top against Philip Schulz and Frank Percic. Do you believe that it's going to be the Gardevoir Zoroark deck that came out of nowhere, or do you think it's going to be Frank's very interesting Buzzwole Garbodor deck? Please just let us know. Get out there with that hashtag +PlayPokemon.
Yeah, and let us know if there's any exciting plays that you see as well, or any exciting things that have happened over the weekend. If you're here, let everyone know. Let everyone get involved. So we're going to have to see, do you reckon, how this match will go in terms of, will it go to a Game 3? Will one player take it 2-0? I know we were saying when we were looking earlier at this Buzzwole-GX Garbodor list that it was, possibly favored, but you never know with players like Philip Schulz. They're just so skilled. They can just pull out tricks at the last minute, and, we've also seen decks that haven't drawn so well when they needed to as well.
Yeah, I think one thing that might come up is that when Philip does all this testing, he's probably looking at the main 4 or 5 decks in the meta and making sure that he has great matchups against that. I don't know if Buzzwole Garbodor was on his list of decks to make sure you had a good matchup against, or to make sure that you at least had an idea. He did choose to go with the Mew instead of the Mewtwo, which is normally a nod to saying that Garbodor is not on my radar. along with, I think he only plays 2 Field Blower, so that could be something to watch out for too. Maybe he just said, if I see Garbodor, I'm in trouble, but I'm a good enough player. I'll just get my Guardies out fast and figure it out.
Yeah, hit the field blows at the right time, right? And that is a crucial resource we're going to have to watch out for, you know, if those are prized or if he's not able to get them at the right time, if he has to sycamore them away as we've seen in previous matches. Looks like we're jumping right into the game now. We have Philip Schulz on your left, facing against Frank Percic on your right. Philip, as we're talking about, is the Gardevoir-GX Zoroark-GX player. He has a slew of achievements as well. Top 8 at a couple of special events. Top 8 at the Latin America International Championships. So he's pretty used to this pressure and, you know, player of international caliber.
Yeah, and look at that. That's all in just 2017. We aren't going to get into all the history that Philip has brought us, but he's done fantastically. And we see him now here at this stage, potentially trying to add international champion to that list.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, top 8 is nothing to scoff at. These events have so many players, and there are so many rounds. You have to keep your mental stamina as well. It's just really an event of being able to keep mentally sound throughout the whole thing and looking after yourself as you go. Not just about bringing a consistent deck and making the right plays.
Yep. Frank Percic on the other side. He has got some accomplishments of his own. He's made top cut at a few of these, and also very recently that Memphis Regionals top 32. I believe that was when he brought out this deck in the first place, the Buzzwole Garbodor deck. And right now we can see his MVPs on the screen. That Carving Break, not a card that we thought we were going to see very much of. He was ready for the walls, but it's also pretty good if you slow your opponent down. You can start to set up that Buzzwole-GX and all those big attacks. And that's a great way to beat a player of Philip's caliber.
Yeah, we've actually seen that Carving Break come into play quite a few times in the match that we saw of Frank's. He was able to use it to load up those special energies back on the Buzzwole. This is one of the only Buzzwole-GX decks in this build that doesn't just strictly run fighting or strong energy. It does have those rainbow energies, so it's able to use that. Garbodor's Trash Launch and get a sneaky KO if your opponent, punish them for using so many items. But yeah, that Carving Break is able to get back any energy from the discard and really accelerate onto those Buzzwoles if you happen to miss those max elixirs. But a lot of people haven't been missing them.
We talked about if he could find rare candies for his Gardevoir. He prized 3 of them right off the bat. So that is definitely something that Philip is going to have to look out for.
And we know that he only runs 3. So that makes it even more challenging. He's going to have to take some cheap knockouts, maybe with some Zoroarks. And he's going to find out when he Wonder Tags and searches his deck whether he'll keep an eye on those rare candies. He's probably going to search a few times. The first time you look, you think, did I miss it? It's surely in there.
Did the judges mess my list up when I handed in my deck? What happened?
But he's probably going to have to alter his strategy a little bit here and maybe take a couple of cheap prizes with those maybe Zoroark-GXs just to get some prizes and hopefully hit one of those rare candies. But yeah, certainly not something you want to see in your prize cards.
Yeah, that is definitely something. Philip is probably going to be very surprised to see that. Also, starting probably not his ideal active Pokemon there in Giratina. It's not going to do very much in this matchup, and it does have a 2 retreat cost, so a little bit awkward.
Yeah, it's typically one of those cards that players have been including to sort of counter those Greninja breaks. We haven't seen any Greninja breaks this weekend, but it's always good to have that one option just in case you run in against it, whether that's in the first round or the last round. As long as you have an option against cards like that, it's always good as an inclusion. As you said, probably not the card you want to be starting with, or certainly using at all in this matchup, but classic turn 1 from Philip there, getting down 3 Pokemon. He probably identified, I'm not going to get a Routes if I don't have any rare candies.
I'm not going to do anything with these guys. Yeah, he does have a Zoroark in his hand, so definitely setting up to get an opening trade on turn 2. And, of course, if those trades can get more Zoroarks, he might be able to get one of those big starts that we've been seeing out of Philip all tournament long.
And, I mean, triple Zoroark-GX is quite an impressive board state. It means you can look at a lot of cards in your deck each turn. You can trade away cards that you don't particularly need. And Frank coming down with that Parallel City, I feel like he has it first earned every game that we've seen him.
Yeah, it's amazing how often he can get this card down. And little awkward for Frank. He does have to throw away a Floatstone. Didn't have any extra Pokemon to play onto the board. Also not going to get a turn 1 knockout on a Zorua, especially when it has a double colorless energy. That's a little unfortunate for him. But does find that Ultra Ball, that means I believe we will be seeing a Buzzwole coming down soon.
Yeah, there are two supporter cards that Frank typically wants to find on his first turn of the game, and that's his one Bridget that he plays or his one Lily. After turn 1, they're not quite as impactful or not really cards that you want to see, and unlike Philip, who was playing a Zoroark-GX, he can't just sort of trade them away and get them out of his deck when he doesn't need them. Yeah, a little bit unfortunate there, and Sycamoring away a few pieces that could be useful later, such as that Guzma.
Yep, Frank now, he does have the Buzzwole. This means he can get a little bit of damage onto that Giratina. Of course, it does have a fighting resistance, so it might actually be a pretty good wall against Buzzwole. But 30 damage will be able to hit one of these Zoruas, and it's going to be interesting to see which one he decides to go with here. Likely that Philip would be evolving the one with the double colorless energy, so maybe you try to put some pressure on a different Zorua and maybe get a knockout early in the game with that.
Yeah, to force him to evolve the Zorua that does have the damage on it, so it's not going to be cheaply knocked out by a Jet Punch, even though it is on the bench, doing 30 damage there. And forces Philip perhaps to find another double colorless energy to play on that Zoroark-GX. Unless, of course, and we have seen this from Philip in the past, he could just get out triple Zoroark-GX in one turn. It has happened.
That's right. Well, Philip is going to start this turn with that Zoroark, most likely. We do see Trubbish, but there's only one Trubbish on the board, so that means if Philip is able to just hit a Guzma, he has a knockout lined up on this Trubbish. That would be huge for him, and I see it in his hand. So definitely that's going to be his supporter for the turn here. Does he have anything else to combine with it? I don't think so.
Yeah, cleverly opts to do the trades and make other choices before he plays his supporter for the turn, just in case there's a better option. You always want to make sure that, you know, you're making the best plays and you have the most options available to you.
Yep, looks like one of those cards was Evo Soda, so that's actually a fairly good card for him right here. Is going to be able to get another Zoroark-GX out, and that means we will see more trades coming down. Is limited to just 3 Pokemon with that Parallel City, so not going to be able to get any more basics down. But this is all he needs. 80 damage is going to be plenty to knock out a Trubbish, and Philip's going to be off to a pretty great start.
Yeah, certainly not that ideal start for Frank, though. He wanted that Bridget, or he wanted that Lele, or at least the ability to get down more basic Pokemon, certainly more than one Trubbish. And I wonder what he's thinking now, how he'll actually respond to this. Hopefully he can get down more Trubbish and still keep the same strategy of trying to get that Garbotoxin in play, as if you're able to prevent that trade ability. You know, you really put this deck behind this Zoroark-GX deck.
Yeah, now, oh, look at that, even a third Zoroark, so when there's one, there's several. Always these Zoroarks traveling in packs, and he's going to get another trade-off. Don't need that Ralts. You don't have any rare candies.
Yeah, so I mean, he can only have 4 Pokemon in play with that Parallel City, but that is enough to knock out that Trubbish. That is all he needs. Whether he's just going to forgo the Ralts Gardevoir-GX strategy, I think, because he can't reliably take those rare candies off the prizes, we'll have to see. He could just go in for Zoroark-GX in this game. Yeah,
and it looks like Zoroark-GX is going to be a big piece of the puzzle here, trying to get him some prize cards and maybe find a Gardevoir in the future. But taking out that Trubbish is going to be a huge piece. Now he doesn't have to worry about any of his trades being canceled for at least another turn.
I mean, we talk about Garbotoxin like it's just a game ender, as if, like, Gardevoir-GX not being able to use Secret Spring, Zoroark-GX not being able to use Trade is just the end for Philip, but it really isn't. He still has options there, and another strategy that Frank can go into is if he's able to spread enough damage with Jet Punch, Espeon-EX can actually devolve all these Zoroark-GXs. He can take a lot of sneaky prizes that way.
That's right. We do see Buzzwole with the Fighting Fury Belt, has the second energy attached too. Frank was able to save a Trubbish from the discard pile, so hoping to find at least one more so that he doesn't just walk into a second Guzma. That would be pretty unfortunate for him, and it doesn't look like he has it. Just going to have to use this Buzzwole-GX and attack in for 80 damage on this Zoroark, and can start to work on another Zoroark, lining up that Espeon de-evolution play that you were speaking about.
Yeah, he's just choosing which Zoroark-GX he likes least. Just to put some damage on that one there.
Yeah, old lefty. He never stood a chance.
How relevant will that Fighting Fury Belt be, do you think, in this matchup? I mean, it looks like Zoroark, because of its damage cap, is only ever going to be dealing a maximum of 150 damage. Does it really become relevant at all? Or a maximum of 80 damage, or 110 with that Parallel City down?
Yeah, I think it's important just for the amount of health that you have. If you can lock out your opponent at just 80 damage, and they aren't able to find choice bands, so you're guaranteeing that you have at least 3 turns with that Buzzwole, and that can just really add up. Philip with a nice play there. He does have that max potion, threw down a new double colorless energy, and he was able to heal up his Zoroark and probably buy himself at least another turn or two with his Zoroark in the active spot. Can start to put on some pressure on this Buzzwole, but with his supporter as N for the turn, that means we aren't going to see another Guzma, and that Trubbish is going to survive.
Yeah, it gives Frank a chance to evolve that into a Garbodor and have that Garbo Toxin, or if he so chooses, a Trashalanche Garbodor, although I do feel that he'll be going into the Garbo
Maybe
Toxin
later in the game, yeah.
version, yeah, but that max potion, yeah, pretty big, sort of delays Frank being able to get some prizes off that Zoroark-GX as well.
Yeah, and with the Parallel City in play, that means that Philip is only maxing out at 80 damage with his Zoroark, so that Garbotoxin Garbodor would not be in range of being knocked out even, which is something that Frank's not used to. Most of the time when Garbotoxin gets targeted, it's going to get knocked out.
And I think with Philip just discarding that Gardevoir-GX there, he's sort of saying, yeah, we're not going to go this strategy. We can't reliably get rid of this Parallel City. There's no time to put down a routes, really. Maybe late game he will if he can find those rare candies off the prizes, but I believe having 3, it's a little bit too crippling, and this is probably going to look more like a quad Zoroark-GX deck, I think, at this point, featuring Giratina.
Yeah, of course Giratina, the MVP with that resistance, is going to be coming into play. Philip, he does give himself a pretty big hand here, which is exactly what he wants. If Frank doesn't have the N, then that means he can get the most out of those field blowers, and we see one come down pretty early, actually. This means that he can start to put some more Pokemon into play, and even if Garbotoxin does come down, he could just use Guzma and a double colorless energy to take it off the board.
Yeah, it's really good, and if another Parallel City does come down as well now, he can just clear that Giratina off the board and keep that routes in play, so at a time of his choosing, he can turn into a Gardevoir-GX once he gets that rare candy.
That's right. Frank, he does find himself a tool. He's got the Fighting Fury Belt on Trubbish, so for the moment, it's got a little extra hit points, but I don't think that's going to stick around too much. Frank probably going to be using this Ultra Ball, find himself a Tapu Lele, and get the ball rolling here. Just a lot of awkward draws with energy cards, and just needs to probably find himself an end to lower Philip's hand and find himself a way to lock out all of these trades.
Yeah, if you compare an N with a Garbotoxin Garbodor, it's pretty impactful. It means that Philip's pretty much stuck with the hand that he has. He can't trade away cards. And, you know, this Gardevoir list doesn't run too many draw supporters. It has those 3 N and those 2 Sycamore. It's relying somewhat on those 2 Mallow that it has in combination with the trade ability. So, yeah, it's a pretty difficult spot if Philip doesn't just immediately have the field blower in hand or some draw supporters or options.
Yeah, and we saw him use that one just last turn, so only one more available unless he's able to find double puzzle, but that's going to be pretty difficult when you're getting end and you're only going to find 5 cards, that 6 card off the top deck.
And Frank there does get down the second Trubbish before he does play the N as well, which gives him that option to evolve 1 into the Garbotoxin Garbodor, and then the next turn that he has available, he can play into the other Garbodor and have a threat in terms of damage other than Buzzwole as well.
Yeah, we also saw with the Ultra Ball, Frank decided to hold on to a Rainbow Energy rather than a Strong Energy, and I think that was a nod to potentially having that Trashalanche Garbodor come down. And,
yeah, he always wants to have as many options as he can available to him.
Definitely. Frank now just really wants to find Ultra Ball, Garbotoxin, something. Immediately I see that Ultra Ball come down, so that's just how it works sometimes.
I mean, what else he has in his hand, though, is a bit of something. Like, it's not things he wants to immediately throw away. I see that Rainbow Energy, I see other energy, I see that Espeon-EX and an Acerola. Yep. All of those cards are not cards you just want to frivolously throw away just to grab that Garbodor. Although he's going to have to, because it's quite a priority in this matchup.
Right, he may potentially even use the Tapu Lele just to get a different supporter into his hand before he plays down the Garbotoxin Garbodor, shutting off all abilities. And it looks like that's what he's eyeing up right now. Just curious to see if he decides to go with a Sycamore to get himself a bunch of cards, or if he assumes that this Buzzwole is going to hit the discard pile and he goes for an N. And wisely, Frank deciding to go with that N, he's going to be prepared for when Philip takes these extra prizes.
Yeah, it's one of those times where order of operations is so important. Putting that Tapu Lele GX before you lock yourself out of abilities.
Yeah, that'd be bad.
It's the best way to do it.
Definitely don't want to do that. And Frank, right now, he's just looking at his discard pile before he does this Ultra Ball discard. Definitely knows he wants to get rid of this Acerola. It looks like a good card right now, but that Buzzwole is going to be knocked out most likely in the coming turn. So, gonna get rid of that and probably just another energy card.
Yeah,
And
pretty important looking through his discard pile as well that there were actually 2 Rainbow Energy in there. He has one in hand and I believe one is prized. So that one that he has in his hand is his only live energy for the Trashalanche Garbodor.
yeah, I think he's got one on the Buzzwole right there. So I think that's his last one in his hand.
He's just going to Jet Punch now, deal 60 to the active Zoroark-GX and 30 on a benched one.
Yep. If he's going with the plan of potential Espeon, I really like it going right there. And perfect, both of these Zoruas have 60 hit points underneath these Zoroark-GX. So Frank, he's setting up some nice plays for himself. He could have a pretty big turn following with an N.
Yeah, he won't grab the 4 prizes off the Zoroark-GXs, unfortunately, but you know what? Sometimes just knocking out the Zoruas is good enough. Does certainly limit the trade, and if Philip is able to find one of those field blowers, he won't have access to trade. He'll just have one Zoroark available. Plays out another Ralts, kind of preparing. He's going to get some prizes, and you know, when there's 3 rare candies prized, he did actually manage to grab one of them, so that does mean we could see a Gardevoir in the coming turns.
Yeah, he finally was able to get one, so he will have one left over into his deck because I believe this N will be coming down fairly soon. Frank now just has to decide if he's going to bench this Espeon, where does his energy attachment go, and then surely we'll see Philip going down to just drawing 3 cards after taking those 2 prizes.
Yeah, I guess it's a question of when is the best time to use Espeon, because really you're only going to be able to use it once, maybe twice, but you really want to optimize the best, find the best time to use it. Is it after Philip plays the Gardevoir and uses that rare candy that he has and that Frank assumes, you're not really hitting those rare candies, so if I can just devolve one of your Gardevoir-GX, you might not be able to find it again. Or does he just do it now and limit the trades?
Yeah, definitely an interesting call here. Also, Buzzwole with double strong energy is doing a fairly good amount of damage. Maybe you just don't worry about de-evolving if you can just take some big GX knockouts here.
Yeah, that's certainly another strategy that we can definitely see. And off this end, Frank taking 6 and Philip taking 5, so they're still getting a decent amount of prizes. A decent amount of cards into their hand. We'd have to see if he just hits him with the Buzzwole. Don't believe it'll be a knockout.
Yeah, right now the Jet Punch is doing 140 damage, so it's just going to be 10 short, it looks like. And he's going to start working on that other Zoroark. He's not going to hide the play that he's working on that Espeon, sitting right there on his bench, but definitely something that you're still going to go for.
Yeah, it really forces Philip to respond. He's saying, look, I can pretty much knock you out with Buzzwole, and if I don't knock you out with Buzzwole, I'm going to devolve you with Espeon, and I'm going to take some prizes, and you're still not going to have trade, even if you find the field blower. So yeah, it's a pretty difficult spot for Philip right now, and he's going to have a good combination of cards to be able to get out of it. I'm never going to discount Philip Schulz, though. He always comes back with some brilliant play.
That's right. He does need to find something, though. He is running out of options. He's going to have to find probably the field blower or the double puzzle of time to get things going. This might be the last time that he does have all these trade options even available to him with the way that Frank has set up all this damage on the board. Oh, I don't know if this is the best for him. He does have to just Mallow, but that's all he's got in his hand.
Yeah, his hand doesn't give him too many options. What do you look for with this Mallow? I mean, what do you assume that Frank is going to be doing next turn?
Well, after you see your opponent use Mallow and put cards on the top of their deck, probably they're going to put something fairly important, so you're going to have to end them. But if Frank doesn't have that option available to him, which is pretty hard when he's also under Garbodor lock, you have to assume that Philip is going to get himself at least a field blower, but if he has a puzzle piece, which we know he does in his hand, he can just grab the second puzzle piece and get himself a few options set up. And he could maybe have a huge swing turn with that Mew that we see that he's eyeing up. He's got one puzzle piece, and it looks like he's going to give himself something else beneficial to that combination, try to get a big swing with Mew into the Buzzwole, copying Riotous Beating.
Yeah, and once he does draw that field blower for his turn, he will have access to all his trades, and so he will definitely see the second card that he's put on top, and quite a few more as well. So hopefully he can sort of build some momentum that way, but I guess it's also dependent on what Frank decides to do on his turn as well. I mean, you've got to assume that he's going to be taking a couple of knockouts this turn onto some Zoroark-GXs. But does he choose to take the knockout, or does he choose to devolve?
Yeah, and maybe he puts some extra damage on the other Zoroark and knocks out a Ralts even, taking some more prizes and just sets up for a huge de-evolution that removes all of the Zoroarks. It just depends on how much pressure he feels he's under. Also, he has an Acerola in his hand, and he just played down a Float Stone, so that means he can just remove all the damage on his Buzzwole. That's a huge play for Frank.
He chooses to go for it.
Yeah, this is huge for him. He's going to be able to have free retreat right back into that Buzzwole, play it back down, 190 hit points, no damage counters, and it looks like with that play, probably just going to promote the Buzzwole again, remove this Zoroark from play, get himself some prize cards, and he can get 30 damage onto that Zoroark with the Fairy Energy, which lines up perfectly with that Espeon.
Yeah, it definitely threatens then a further 2 prizes the next turn, and we'll see what Frank's going to grab 2 prizes now.
Yeah.
One of which is Floatstone, which is pretty relevant if Philip, he is going to play that Field Blower, we assume, is the card that he chose to put on top with Mallow. But it means that Frank can just put another Floatstone straight back down and keep that ability lock going.
Yeah, Frank was able to find Floatstone and end there. Philip is obviously going to have a pretty big turn here. I think this might actually be enough to win the game if he can line it up properly. He's going to have to use double Puzzle a time, try to find a Mew and a double Colorless Energy. He already has free retreat with that Floatstone on the Giratina, and that would be enough damage to knock out a Buzzwole and take 2 prizes. Actually, he does have 3, so it would be a strong turn for him, but not game-ending.
Yeah, but will we see a Gardevoir-GX? That's what I want to know as well.
That's true, too. It just depends on if he's also able to line up that one rare candy that we know he was able to put back into his deck after he drew it out of the prize cards.
Yeah, but very methodical player, Philip Schulz. He's really going to weigh up all his options. He's going to play the double Puzzle of Time and see what he can get back with that. Naturally, a Field Blower.
That's a pretty good one, yeah.
Pretty good card to get back there, so he's able to use his trades. He's eyeing up a Mallow as well. It's one of those cards that synergizes quite well with the trade ability when you can get it off, but he's also thinking about an N as well, which will put, if he does play the N, it will put Frank down to 4 cards, and a little bit hard to draw out of. Yeah,
this could mean that Frank won't be able to find any real attacker if this Buzzwole is able to fall. Philip has to still find a few extra pieces in order to get the Mew into play. And I also see rare candy, but yeah, it doesn't have anything else to go with it. Finds double Colorless Energy and has Ultra Ball in hand, so just needs to find a few cards to throw away with the Ultra Ball. Is able to do that. Unfortunately, one of them is a puzzle piece, but this is just something you got to do at this stage of the game.
Yeah, and so he gets out that Mew, that fabled Mew that all weekend has been the bane of those Buzzwole-GX players, and is able to find a DC as well, and plays the N. Yeah, that's such a big turn for Philip. He's going to find himself 3 cards, but more importantly, he's limiting Frank down to just 4. Frank has a bunch of weird Pokemon that don't do very good attacks right now besides Espeon, but that's not going to affect his Mew. And that's going to be the big attacker for the rest of the game, potentially, when we see these Zoroarks de-evolved. I mean, yeah, if Frank's able to find that energy, that
true, yeah.
Rainbow Energy or Fighting Energy, and attach it to that Espeon-EX, once he devolves those Zoroarks, what attack does Mew-EX copy?
Yeah, it starts to run out of attacks. We saw earlier in the tournament players using interesting attacks like Zorua's Ram, and I'm sure there's something out there that Mew would be able to find if Riotous Beating is not available. And so now we see the Parallel City the other way. The shoe is on the other foot. Now Frank has to actually discard 2 of his Pokemon. And pretty easy options, it seems like. He just went straight for that Tapu Lele. Yep, and using this last puzzle piece as well. It's the 4th one. It's not going to do any double puzzle stuff, so you might as well just see what the top cards are. Maybe you can line up something pretty good to end the game on the following turn. I mean, he knows it's possible that Frank could have just drawn into another Floatstone, and he can play it straight back down and trade won't be available. He also knows that Frank could just devolve those Zoroarks, and then, trades are not available then either, so he just wants to manipulate his top deck to make sure he has options next turn. Yeah, we did get an update from the other top 8 game. As we are playing this one, all the other ones are going on as well, and Joe is up 1 game against Azul. So in that Buzzwole Lycanroc mirror match, Joe has been able to come out on top on the first game. And so he's done exactly as we predicted. We should be playing this top 8 match. No, Espeon is probably going to be devolving those Zoroark-GX, as Frank has very intelligently set that up for himself to be able to clear those Zoroark-GX from the board. And what a great hand for Frank. I'm sure that Philip was hoping for that end to do a lot more damage. Instead, it gave Frank 7 cards now. He's got a tool on his Garbotox and Garbodor, and an energy on that Espeon to get rid of all of the trades, even if they were to potentially come back. Those Zoruas are no longer there. But with a
weakness to Psychic, if Philip is able to find that Field Blower and use that versatile of Mew's ability and copy an attack and find some damage onto that Espeon-EX could be going down pretty easily. If he's able to find a good attack to copy, that is.
Yeah, a lot of good attacks kind of left the board. Even if you weren't able to get the weakness damage down, Tapu Lele's Energy Drive would have been a pretty nice one to copy if there were one available. Instead, I don't actually even see an attack that Mew could copy right now besides de-evolving that Garbodor.
Yeah, certainly, and I don't think that really puts Philip any further ahead. But
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't even be able to happen because Garbotoxin also.
So he's got to find Field. So this is a very unusual board state for these two decks, but he is able to find the Field Blower, gets rid of the Fighting Fury Belt. Does mean his abilities are online. It means he can use Versatile to copy an attack. It means he can also use Wonder Tag to find a supporter that might be better, but yeah, it's a bit difficult when you don't have trade available to you and you're sort of used to doing that. But he did have one of his 2 Professor Sycamores, and he is able to discard his hand and draw 7 and keep rolling that way.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Philip would be loving a rare candy right here. He does have a Gallade in hand. He does have some Ultra Balls. It just looks like it's going to be a little slow for him. Maybe he can start to find some Zoroark, but we just saw a few get de-evolved, and then he had to use a Professor Sycamore, so does he have many left?
I mean, he has put down an attack for himself that he can use, which is that Zoroark's Ram that we were talking about before, so, you know, it's a little something happening, but also looks like he can also copy that Energy Drive like we were talking about before, but maybe he's looking to get another Zoroark down and get down some more, you know, trade GX, but how many Field Blowers has he run through?
Well, we know he played one early, and he was able to bring it back with the puzzle time, and he used it again. And then we saw another one this turn, so I believe he's all out at this point. All 4 puzzles have hit the discard pile along with the 2 Field Blowers.
I mean, Philip is only down to 1 prize, so if he's able to take a cheap prize against, say, the Trubbish, for example, either next turn or this turn, and prevent a 2-prize knockout on himself, he will be able to take this game. I mean, it doesn't look like Frank has too much going for him other than that, you know, devolving Espeon, which might not be the greatest right now, unless he's able to find cards that he doesn't run, like Double Colorless Energy, to actually attack.
Yeah, if he could steal that off the Mew right now, he'd be in a pretty good spot.
But you can never discount Buzzwole. It has a lot of HP, and you know it can come into play pretty easily. It's just a basic, and it does just need 1 energy to be able to attack. So, you know, Frank could apply some pressure if he just finds the right pieces.
Just look at these players. Both of them are diligently looking through the discard piles to see what all resources their opponent has left. What have they used? Philip is just counting all these ends over on Frank's side, trying to make sure he can hold on to this hand that he has. Even wants to count one more time, wants to see what else is available. Maybe wants to get a count on how many energies are around. Maybe Frank doesn't have enough energies to finish this game. We've seen so many hit the discard pile already.
Yeah, retreats to Mew. He's recognizing, you know, this is a 120 HP EX Pokemon that could fairly easily be knocked out. So, you know, I don't want to have these double colorless energy on here when I could just lose the game through a cheap loss of a Mew-EX.
Yeah, and he's going to start to set up that Mew-EX, obviously hoping that a Field Blower doesn't come down because that a tool doesn't come down, because I think he's out of Field Blowers at this point, and then that Mew would be completely turned off for the rest of the game.
I mean, alternatively, if he can find Zoroark-GX, that's a pretty decent attacker. It can do 120 damage just for a double colorless energy, and when you're against an Espeon-EX that only has 160 HP left, you know, 2 shots with that, it's enough to knock it out. But we see Frank here is Ultra Balling. What do you think he's looking for?
I think he needs an attacker at this point. If he can find another Buzzwole, that would be pretty great for him. Just needs to start putting on some pressure. If he can get some damage onto Ralts and then use a Guzma and hit that Ralts one more time, potentially with a Fighting Fury Belt, he could knock out 2 Ralts and just clean up a game, or even take out that Zoroark early. That'd be nice for him.
So looking through his deck, I believe we do see a Buzzwole, but he's also looking at the Garbodor that has the attack Trash Avalanche, and it looks like he's going to go for the Buzzwole-GX.
Yeah, he has 2 energies left. They're both in his hand. I believe it was a basic energy and a strong energy. None in his deck anymore. So he's just going to have to finish out the game with this Buzzwole, with these 2 energies. And that's a pretty scary thought for Frank. I don't even think he can play a tool that isn't Floatstone on Garbodor anymore, because he might just get stuck stranded in the active spot.
checks his opponent's discard pile as well. It's almost just as important to know what your opponent can do as what you can do with the resources you have. So checking what they have left, what plays are available to them. It's really important knowledge to have just to find, have you played your field blowers? Do you have ends left? How many Guzmas have you played? These are all really important things to know when making decisions about your plays, and playing that Fighting Fury Belt pretty confidently down the Buzzwole as well. It's giving it so much HP, doesn't seem like it's going to be knocked out anytime soon.
Yeah, watching these two great minds go at it, trying to just get every bit of information they have. They do have 75 minutes coming into the cut, so of course using all that time as wisely as possible is encouraged, and they're going to make the best plays possible. And it looks like Frank has lined up for this Buzzwole to be his finisher. He can start to get some damage down. Of course, Giratina with that resistance is probably not the Pokemon he's going to get to knock out, but he can start to work on a Pokemon like that Zorua, and that's who he is going to target.
Yeah, definitely. It's a pretty interesting choice as Zorua, but you'd think that maybe if he put, I don't know, 30 damage onto a Ralts and is able to Guzma the Zorua next time, but recognizing that it could become a Zorua-GX anytime now.
Oh, and look at that. Philip had everything he needed there. He can just use the double colorless energy Guzma and Zoroark to knock out the Trubbish, and that's going to be his last prize.
Yeah, pretty back and forth game. That was pretty impressive. Really came down to just what cards they could draw and what options they had available to them, and yeah, what they had to throw away and things like that. I mean, we looking at this thought, Garbotoxin so good against this Gardevoir Zoroark check, but looks like they can just play around it without Rare Candy.
Yeah, I don't know if that's indicative of how the matchup is always going to go. Philip awkwardly didn't have access to any of his Gardevoir or Gallade line, and that's pretty important for him. If he's able to sneak out an early Gardevoir, that also means that Twilight can come into play and get him all those resources back. And as we saw, this matchup was completely dependent on their resources. If Philip is able to get 10 more cards that help him out, you'd think that he'd be in a favorable spot.
I mean, we also have to see with Frank's first couple of turns, he pretty much only had a Buzzwole-GX and a Trubbish, so they weren't really the ideal turns that he's looking for, and hopefully this time when he goes first, he'll be able to find, that Bridget or that Lily and get down multiple Trubbishes. And so, that Guzma on the Trubbish very early, knocking it out, was pretty impactful. I mean, it let Philip set up a little bit and apply a little bit of pressure, take maybe an early prize, and it put Frank behind a little bit. But yeah, I do feel that Philip recovered really well in that matchup, despite the fact that he had no Rare Candies.
Yeah, I think the fact that the early Trubbish fell led to like 9 trades happening before Garbotoxin was able to come into play, and that is not something Frank wants to happen. He usually wants that number to be 0, and he was not able to do that. So hopefully for him, he's going to be able to find a little better of a setup. Looking at the prize cam, we see double puzzle prized for Philip. Not terrible if he's able to line those up together. And on the other side, Frank prized one of each Garbodor. Not terrible for him either.
Yeah, it wasn't cards that were typically one-ofs that you'd hate to see prized. It was a little bit of everything, which is not too bad to see. But looking at Frank's hand now, he definitely has options. He has that Bridget. That's what you'd love to see. I mean, of course, you can always Ultra Ball for a Tapu Lele to GX to get that Bridget, but it's nice to just have it in your hand so you don't have to waste that bench spot on a Tapu Lele GX.
Absolutely. When both of these players are playing cards like Parallel City, you want to make sure that you are using your bench spots as wisely as possible. It's also really nice to have that Tapu Lele GX later in the game when potentially your opponent has already used a field blower and you're trying to find a supporter card. So not having to use that resource of the Tapu Lele is pretty nice for him here.
Yeah, it's looked like Frank's identifying that maybe this Carbink with the Energy Keeper ability might be a good option in this matchup. That's the one that evolves into the Carbink Break, which can accelerate energy. So maybe he's looking for a little bit of a slower game, and instead of spreading those, a bit of more of an explosive game, instead of spreading those jet punches around, he actually wants to be using Knuckle Impact and Absorption GX and just take prizes rather than spread around and do this devolving strategy.
Yeah, we saw last game he just ran out of energies and it got pretty awkward for him. He was only down to 1 energy left in his deck, but if Carbink Break is able to get him some energy acceleration, then he's never going to have that issue, and he'll have plenty of energies to do all sorts of attacks, and we might even see that Trash Lanch.
Yeah, typically when we look at these Buzzwole-GX, Lycanroc-GX that have sort of dominated this top 32, they're running a lot of energy. I think it's about 15, so it's something like 9 fighting energy, 4 strong energy.
Yeah.
Frank, for his part, only has those 4 strong, 4 rainbow, and 2 fighting energy. So, yeah, I mean, getting those energy back is really important, especially when you're playing against decks like, Gardevoir-GX has that enhanced hammer, that can be pretty critical sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Philip, he gets his ideal start as well. Everybody with that full art Bridget, it seems to be floating right to the top, and they're finding exactly what they need. Philip is going to find a Ralts this time around. I don't see any issues with the rare candies, so might as well stick that Ralts. And I mean, that leaves the option of a turn 2 Gallade or Gardevoir.
Yeah, he's probably much happier to see three rare candy in his deck rather than 0 this
Yeah,
time.
that's right.
Has to waste a puzzle of time pretty early though, and it's not something you really want to be doing. But you know, when you have to draw into something, you should have to play it. And unfortunately, that's something he's going to draw into is not great.
Yeah, and he doesn't have very much going for him, and he also, I don't know if I agree with the way that he played the puzzle. He switched a card at the very last second, which makes me, it kind of shows your opponent, neither of these cards is a supporter. It's very unlikely that both of those were going to be supporter cards and you just changed your mind at the last second. So if I were Frank, I would not use an N here if I could avoid it. It looks like your opponent might just be looking at 3 cards that do nothing.
Yeah, it's a bit of mind games there. You sort of have to read your opponent as well. And looks like he's going to Ultra Ball here, Frank. And he's going to grab out a Garbotoxin Garbodor and thinking about evolving it.
Yeah, this could mean that he has a Guzma in his hand, or he has a Floatstone immediately. That would be great for him.
Yeah, I think you wouldn't be so hesitant if you had the Floatstone in your hand. I think you just evolve straight away. It looks like he is going to attach, and then I believe he has a Guzma and he has an N, so it's decisions to be made. I don't think it's incorrect to play the Guzma here, just to get out the Zoroark, put a bit of pressure onto the bench Zoroark or the Ralts as well, and certainly not play that N when you know that your opponent's really hesitant with what they're going to pick up next turn.
Yeah, I think Philip gave up a little too much information, and I do like that the damage is going on the Ralts here. Definitely sensing that Philip just has nothing, and you can start to remove any threats that you see coming. Also has that Field Blower. He can play his own Parallel City, and if he chooses to not knock out any Pokemon, he could avoid Tapu Lele coming into play as a top deck, but he knows he doesn't have to worry about that for at least 2 more turns. Philip has 3 really bad cards on the top of his deck.
Yeah, unfortunately drawing a lot of nothing, and even though that Garbotoxin Garbodor is down, it does not have a tool attached, which means that, yes, Philip is able to use that Tapu Lele GX as Wonder Tag, but Frank here is pretty happy to just keep jet punching around and knocking out all the Pokemon that he can.
Yep, so this was the last card that Philip had in that puzzle of time, so potentially some live draws coming up for him soon. Frank, on the other hand, says, I got a Tapu Lele. I'm going to throw away this N that I've been holding on to because you have nothing. Even if he had a Floatstone potentially, he could have went ahead and grabbed a Guzma, removing both Zorua from play, but looks like that's not an option for him. Just going to go ahead and get down multiple Garbodor and use this Sycamore to draw 7 cards.
Yeah, that would be pretty crippling for Philip if he was able to clear, Frank was able to clear the field of Zoruas. You'd think at that point that Philip might just think, let's go to game 3 because I have no draw engine going whatsoever.
Yeah, with 75 minutes, I think Philip's going to look a little closer. There's always potential for him to sneak a crazy Mew out of nowhere and knock out this Buzzwole as long as he has a Zoroark in play. But it is getting pretty scary at this point, and it looks like Frank is even going to add a little more damage with a strong energy to put some pressure on this Giratina and remove that Zorua. And it looks like Philip found himself a Mallow as that 4th card. It's another slow card. He's just going to have to put some cards on the top of his deck and hope to work his way out of this next turn.
Yeah, it's great when you have a Zoroark-GX in play and you're able to use that trade ability. You just put 2 cards you want to the top, throw away a card that you don't want, and then pick up those 2 cards. But, you know, when you just have a Zorua and a Ralts and a Giratina promo, maybe not so great, and it's not that card that you want to see. Definitely would love to see a Sycamore right now.
Yeah, this is why I don't like Mallow. So sometimes it's just not very good.
You disagree with some of the best players in the world, Kyle.
I mean, I like it in this deck, but right here it's oof.
Yeah,
pretty scary.
So we'll have to see if Frank here can actually knock out the Zorua and just deny any trades coming down whatsoever. All he needs is a Guzma to be able to do that.
Yeah, I like the fact that Philip attached that Fairy Energy to the Ralts. That means that Philip may make Frank attack this Ralts instead of the Zorua. fearing a Rare Candy Gardevoir with a double colorless energy, well, or just any energy really, because that Buzzwole has the 10 damage on it. And that might be something that Frank doesn't have an answer to. And that means that Zorua can stick around, and maybe the Mew can come out of nowhere.
Yeah, you have to kind of start looking at Frank's field as well. I mean, it's a whole lot of Garbodor and Trubbish, and there's a Carbink. There's not really a follow-up attacker.
Right.
I mean, of course, you can always attack with that Tapu Lele GX, but it's really not a priority attacker. So if this Buzzwole is able to be knocked out through some secret Mew, a crazy combination of cards Philip would need for that play, it really would leave Frank with nothing to follow up. But now we see the Carbink break coming down, which certainly can start accelerating energy to Pokemon if this Buzzwole-GX falls.
Yeah, wise of Frank to continue to put on a little pressure here. And of course, this is the right time to play an N. Your opponent just put 2 good cards on the top of their deck. So even though you're only going to go down to 3 cards, probably the best time for you to use this supporter card.
Yeah, definitely. He was probably thinking, you know, I really don't want to use this N. I know you're drawing a whole lot of nothing. And, I mean, I'm not even sure what Philip could have put on the top of his deck that would have actually allowed him to really come back into this game and have a really impactful turn that next turn. I mean, maybe Frank thought he might have been holding a Gardevoir or holding a Rare Candy and just needed that extra piece to be able to get there. But even so, he's now given Philip a whole new hand of 6 and himself down to 3 with that N.
Yeah, looks like he does finally find a tool, though. That's pretty important for him if Philip was able to draw into anything with an ability off of this N.
Still, that Giratina promo sits there. I think that Fighting Resistance has put in a lot of work.
That thing is a horse, I tell you what.
We scoffed at that card initially, but hey, maybe it's for this matchup.
Yeah,
Who knows?
That is his ideal starter. I spoke wrong.
Philip is able to find a lot more off of this N to 6. You know, there's the Ultra Ball. There was a Zoroark-GX that he elected to discard with his Ultra Ball, a Guzma. So he has quite a lot more to work with now, but that Garbo Toxin has actually come into effect, and it means that he won't be able to use that Versatile of the Mew or use that trade of the Zoroark-GX unless you can find a Field Blower to go with it.
Yeah, he also needs a Field Blower to remove this Parallel City if he wants to get any large Riotous beating in the coming turns. And he's got a lot of pretty good cards, even able to thin his hand all the way down to nothing and then use this Sycamore here.
I don't believe he hit the Field Blower, though. I do see one Puzzle of Time, a Rare Candy. Oh, he hit the Field Blower, so he's able to use his abilities this turn if he chooses to discard that Floatstone. Now I guess it's a decision between the Fighting Fury Belt and the Parallel City.
Yeah, I think you have to remove the Parallel City to get yourself a bigger Riotous beating. But it is a difficult call for him. He actually even finds a second Field Blower, so if his Pokemon are able to stick around, he can work through another potential Garbotoxin.
And this is where I think it was clever that Frank was able to target down the Zoruas, just because this has limited Philip to just trading once per turn, whereas if he'd kept some of those Zoruas there and, you know, tried to knock out the Rolts, he'd have a lot more cards to work with this turn. He'd be able to get out so many more Zoroark-GX.
Yeah, interesting. Philip has Max Potion in hand, decided not to use it. I think he wants this Giratina to be knocked out, and he will just go for one big all-in push, promoting the Mew after Frank goes down to 1 prize card, and try to just get an N into everything and knock out this Buzzwole. But it's so much to ask for.
Yeah, certainly, but you know, we've seen crazy things happen.
Oh my.
An Acer Roller on that Buzzwole that actually the damage that it took was just from its own rainbow energy. So we're heading back out with a Carbink break, and so it's going to put down a little bit of damage and start accelerating energy onto that, back onto that Buzzwole.
It's not even going to do any damage. There's a resistance, right? So he can just accelerate some energy.
Oh, of course, there's a basic fighting energy on it.
Yeah, so Frank is just going to play very carefully here. And
yeah,
he's pretty surprised.
Yeah, I mean, he could have taken, I believe, 2 prizes that turn on that Giratina and that Ralts on the bench.
Yeah, he had it lined up, but I guess the way that Philip approached the turn kind of intimidated him. He wanted to play it a bit slower, and Frank's kind of like, oh no, I may have played into something here. He did have another Field Blower, and if we see a Gardevoir come into play soon, and it looks like Rare Candy Gardevoir is the play, we could see all of these resources come right back into play. Philip also might be able to line up a knockout. And yeah, he's got the Mew-EX. He's going to be able to target down this Buzzwole, not losing all of those energies after the play that Frank made, but Frank also missed out on 2 big prize cards.
Yeah, just like that, the momentum has swung back to Philip just from a couple of cards, and you just see the power of that trade GX, who's just able to find so many cards. He's able to have a really big hand to be able to work with.
Yeah, and Frank has no energy in the discard pile to bring back with the Carbink break, I suppose. But this is probably Philip's best turn to use Twilight GX and get all of those great cards back into his deck. He really needs to start finding those field blowers, or maybe he just wants to continue to put on some pressure. Also, off the prize cards, it looks like he was able to find some of the puzzle pieces. So maybe he can continue to put on the aggression here.
Yeah, and which Pokemon do you actually target here? Is he just going to take out the Carbink break? I suppose it's the only Pokemon doing any real damage or accelerating energy anywhere. The only other options are that Tapu Lele or the Garbodor.
Yeah, and it looks like that is what he's going to line up. He's going to make this Gardevoir as big as he can and hopefully just run over everything that Frank has. Frank has nothing in his hand, really, and he's losing every one of his big attackers. That Acerola might have cost him. It looks like he's running low on everything. He found an Enhance Hammer.
But he just has a hand of energy.
Yeah.
I mean, do you even attach?
I guess he's going to start to charge up this Tapu Lele, and he's just going to use this Garbotoxin Garbodor as a sacrifice to this Gardevoir. He doesn't have anything, and he just needs some time to find a supporter.
And you have to think back to that one turn where he retreated the Buzzwole and sent in the Carbink break. He could have taken the Giratina as a prize and also the Ralts. And there's now this Gardevoir-GX that's dominating his field.
Yeah, he played very carefully there with that Acerola, and now his hand is just a bunch of energy cards.
Yeah, how this game has swung, honestly. I believe that Ultra Ball for a Gardevoir-GX might mean we'll see a second Gardevoir-GX, and if we can see some Secret Springs going off, I mean, do these Gardevoir-GX become unstoppable?
I think we're almost at that point. We see another Field Blower. Max Potion coming down. It's going to protect this Giratina from a knockout. And Philip is able to use a Sycamore with an empty hand again, drawing himself 7 cards. Finds a double colorless energy. That means he's going to be able to knock out this Garbotoxin Garbodor. And he's putting himself in a very favorable spot. He's only going to have 2 prize cards left. And there is a GX on the bench for Frank. Just a Guzma away then.
Yeah, with an energy already on it, means that you need fewer energy to knock it out as well.
Frank's just helping him out, but at the same time, that's his only attacker that he really has, unless he wants to bring Trubbish up and start to do some acid sprays.
Yeah, it's so interesting that Philip at the beginning of the game was the one drawing dead, and unfortunately now it's Frank.
Yeah, maybe those 2 prize cards for Frank would have been able to find him a supporter card, and that would have been able to get him the very last prize. I don't know if that Acerola was his best call, but he was just trying to protect himself. Philip even going to buy himself time now. He knows this Garbodor is going to be stuck in the active spot for a while with Frank's hand the way it is, so might as well use your Twilight GX and get all these fantastic cards back. I'm looking at energies, max potions, field blowers, just puzzles of time, everything that helps him make sure he can continue to use his trade ability and Secret Spring.
Yeah, when you're Twilight GXing, you want to make sure they're all cards that you need and that you can use. There's no point putting back in cards that you don't want to see because they're just going straight back in your deck and you can draw them again. But yeah, best time to use Twilight GX when you're not under too much pressure. And yeah, it doesn't look like Frank's really got anything going for him at this point. That Garbotoxin Garbodor doesn't even have a tool. It's unable to retreat, and there are no offensive Pokemon on the bench.
Yep, also, quick note, Joe Rudiger was able to knock out Azul in the top 8 in a 2-0 fashion in that Buzzwole Lycanroc mirror, so congratulations to Joe, and we'll be seeing him in the top 4.
Yeah, and now it's just who he's going to face, and I believe this is the same bracket as that matchup, so it will be one of these players. It'll either be Frank or it'll be Philip Schulz.
Yeah, well, the way that Philip's playing, it looks like it might be him, able to use that Twilight and get so many great cards. Frank says, yeah, those are all really nice. I wish I had some of those. Can I see your discard pile?
Yeah, what options are available to him? I guess it just depends on what he draws because he does just have a hand full of energy. And, well, sometimes that's nice. Right now, it really isn't that great.
Yeah, this is very scary.
And it's another energy,
strong energy. Literally unplayable, has no fighting Pokemon. And he's just going to put an energy on his Trubbish. And that's it. He doesn't have anything else he can do here. If Philip is able to line up this knockout following with a knockout on the Tapu Lele GX, he's going to be able to finish this game in quite a wild fashion, honestly.
And I suspect he probably has the option to be able to find a Guzma. I mean, he has enough in his hand and he has those trades. Do you think it's the correct play to knock out the Tapu Lele GX this turn, or would you take a 1 prize so you're not as susceptible to N?
Yeah, I think taking the 1 prize seems pretty fair here. Maybe if you're able to knock out the Trubbish, you're also in a pretty favorable spot, just because that seems to be the only Pokemon that could even get a reasonable attack off on you. And both these Garbodors aren't doing anything right now. They're just stuck. So I would just try to make sure that no damage can get down on my Gardevoir unless it's from a Tapu Lele, because that's a very simple knockout.
And he finds the Guzma, and he will be able to take out that Trubbish. As you said, it could have evolved into that Garbodor and done some damage with that Trash Launch attack, but now that option is cleared off the field, and Frank's only going to be left with that Tapu Lele GX and 2 Garbodors that don't have any energy and don't have any tools.
Yeah, and Philip wisely was able to shuffle in so many great cards, like more ways to grab Guzma, so that means that finding the final Guzma to win the game after knocking out this Trubbish won't be too terribly difficult for him. That, unless Frank is able to draw himself an N. It looks like he found a Sycamore, though.
Probably about 3 or 4 turns too late, unfortunately.
That's right. And yeah, he's just going to show, hey, look at all these energies. I did not have very much going for me, but he's going to try his best to keep himself in the game. Does find a card like Parallel City, which potentially could help out a little bit.
I think he wants to find an attacking Pokemon and probably some way to get that Garbodor out of the active spot, though. Otherwise, it's going to be stuck there, and it's really at Philip's beck and call.
Yeah, he did not find a way to move his Garbodor. He does have a Rescue Stretcher, which means he can start to work on this Buzzwole, but it seems very unlikely that he's going to find 3 turns to start to charge up this Buzzwole and answer to this Gardevoir.
Yeah, I mean, do you even play the Parallel City at this point and reduce his bench to 3?
I mean, what are you going to get rid of, a Lele and a Giratina?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you got to do what you have to do at this point, and Frank's going to play out all the cards and hope for the best.
Yeah, just a couple of turns earlier, that Sycamore would have been so impactful and would have kept Frank probably in the game, given the combination of cards that he drew, but unfortunately now it's just a Guzma away from an ending, and that's Philip Schulz showing the Guzma, showing the double colors energy and saying, sorry, but that's me going on to top 4.
I mean, nothing to apologize for there. That was a fantastically played game by Philip, able to show off just the power of that Gardevoir when you don't prize all your rare candies.
Yeah, the Gardevoir-GX deck with the Zoroark-GX, I mean, it's just had such an impact on this tournament, and we'll have to find out if, Tord was able to progress as well against that Volcanion. And, I wonder how this mirror match would go. Gardevoir-GX against Zoroark-GX? What would that come down to? I'm
sure that would be fantastic. I don't know if we'd be able to see that matchup until the finals. So if you're looking to see that matchup, you're going to have to hope that that Tord and